Hello! What's going on, guys? Sorry this one's a little bit late, been a very busy week. As you may or may not know, I'm going to Florida on Friday, which means I'm going to be away for 2 weeks. My first vacation in about 12 months. I can't wait. Anyway, today it's time for Preach to Preach at You. Yay! Everybody loves Tuesday, where Preachy's just going to sit back, relax, grab a book, light a little fire, and Preachy's going to talk to you a little while. What are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about one of my favourite things in World of Warcraft, and that's tanking. I'm going to keep this rather brief. But we're going to talk about various bits and tips and tricks and philosophies that are going to help you become a better tank no matter what class you play. Because what do we think of as a tank? Now, on a very basic level and for new players, being a tank is the guy who holds aggro. And various times when the tank dies, the healer is blamed. Let me tell you straight off the bat, that is incredibly wrong. Holding aggro is a trivial part of tanking. It's such a minor part of tanking that I hope you understand and can empathise with the fact that if you're holding aggro, you're doing a very minor part of your job. And more importantly, you should stop focusing on threat as your primary target as a tank, because it comes very naturally as a tank. Many tanks don't have many abilities which actually generate threat. Ergo, we can actually just use these few abilities, get used to them with our hands, and be able to do those without even looking. It's not like a DPSer where every key special ability that flies off cooldown immediately needs to be used at the exact right time to push ourselves to the max. It's not like that for a tank. We can afford to skip a global cooldown here and there on the wrong ability, because the other ability we press still generates a decent amount of threat. And only when we're considering pushing our DPS and we're in a very trivial tank fight is then we look to maximise our uptimes on every single ability. That's when we focus heavily into it. I'm not saying you shouldn't focus on that, because you want to be using, if you're a prot warrior, you want to be using your shield slam on cooldown, you want to be using your mangle on cooldown for a feral druid, and you want to be using your death strike for a DK tank, for example. However, it's not the be-all and end-all. And what you'll gradually come to realise as you tank a little bit more and use the hints and tips and the guides on my channel is you'll actually understand that threat is a very minor part of it, and we can hold threat rather easily. What else do we need to be thinking about? So we're looking at a tank, you're a fresh tank, you're about to tank your first dungeon. What things need to be going through your mind before you even start? And this applies to every class in the world, guys. It doesn't matter. All 4 tank classes follow this same philosophy. So these are the things I want you to consider before you even press Q. 1, am I geared enough? The fact that you can queue means you are geared enough. If you follow my guide and my reforging and you've got all the gear you need that lets you queue up, you are geared enough for your role. So, we're geared enough. Yes, you are. If you can queue, you're geared enough and you followed the instructions I've laid out for you. Secondly, what if my healer is bad? Okay, well here we come to our first philosophy. Always, and I mean always, no matter what, if you are in a looking for group dungeon, assume your healer is terrible. Do that before you even press the button. I'm going to get a shit healer. Once you accept the fact that you are going to get a bad healer, that's a weight off your mind. Yes, you have a bad healer. So now you adjust your play around that fact. We're not going to shout and bawl until this healer sorts himself out, because a good tank can get any healer through a dungeon. Because you must understand that the fact that that healer has got into that dungeon means he's geared enough for it. Yes, he's probably using the wrong spells. Now, we can work around that. Of course, there are some players who are just really, really bad guys. Don't get me wrong. Some players just, if he's not casting anything on you, then you're going to have a hard time, and then you might well look to replace. But if the guy's doing some basic, simple spells, like, let's say we've got a Resto Shaman, he's got Earth Shield on you, you can see Riptides going on you, some heals landed on you, we can deal with that. So before we even press the Q button, we assume our healer is going to be not that great. He's not going to be a superstar healer. Okay, so we've accepted that fact and we're moving on. And now we can do some things to work around that fact. If you look in the video I'm playing in the background, you'll notice at some stage our healer tells us he didn't bring any water. So how did we cope with that? I adjusted my play and still kept a steady pace of the run, while still making sure that healer never had to drink. Many judgment calls. So what's our next one? What if our DPS attacks absolutely everything and they're not attacking my target? Okay, before we even queue, accept that that is going to happen. Okay, just accept it. So how do we cope with that? We assume our DPS is going to go batshit crazy on all the wrong targets, not the ones I want them to attack. Does that mean I should start marking and moaning? No, if you're using raid marks in the 5-man looking for group dungeon for things to DPS, you're doing it wrong, guys. Believe me, this is not a case of, no, the DPS should follow my target. It's really not the case, because you are fully capable of holding aggro on every single target no matter what. As you can see in the video behind me, I've brought Blubzar along with me, who's pulling off 30 to 40k DPS on some trash packs and holding aggro fine. A good DPSer is going to AoE the crap out of everything, and that makes them a better DPSer. So as a tank, you need to accept that fact. DPS is going to go everything. So how do we cope with that? We cope by just making sure we have threat on absolutely everything all the time. We don't assume we're going to do threat on one target. That is just a ridiculous notion for a tank, guys. It's terrible. Get that out of your mind, that you need to be focused on this one target while the others are just about controlled and just about looking at you. Absolute garbage. Spread your threat out. Worst comes to the worst, you can taunt a mob back to you. But other than that, you should be DPSing and out-threatening everybody on every single mob. It is entirely possible, guys. As I've shown in my guides, I brought along many. On my warrior guide, I brought along three 9-1 DPSs against my lobby tank, told them not to help me, no Mr. X and so on, and still did absolutely fine. I'm not going to say you're going to be able to do this at the beginning, but this is an idea you need to have in your head. So, before we've queued, we've agreed our healer's terrible and our DPS is terrible. So now we're in a stronger position, and you might be thinking, Christ, I'm going to have a really, really bad time. More often than not, at least one other person in that group is going to be okay. Alright, and just by having the two of you doing okay, you're more than capable of finishing the heroic run in its current state. You are more than capable of doing that. So we've gone into our dungeon. What's the first thing we do when we enter our dungeon? We've got a bad healer. Remember, this is all in our mind. We don't know if it's true or not. And every time this isn't the case, we're feeling much better about our run. So when do we pull? Do we ask the party if they're ready? I would say not. What you're looking for now is some clues. The only person you need to care about in your group is the healer. Okay? Everybody else can do whatever the hell they want. They're going to do some crap DPS or good DPS, it doesn't matter to you. As long as they're not AFK, in which case that's a burden on the whole party, in which case you're going to look to probably kick that person. So we're looking for signs in the healer that is ready. The main clue for that, guys, which is when I decide to go, is I move straight to the first pack and I get ready to pull. I then look at my healer. Is my healer moving? If not, I'm not going to pull yet. Okay, so my healer started moving. Do I think he's ready to pull? Have I gained the necessary buffs from that healer that shows me that he is ready, he's in front of his PC, he's ready to roll? What buffs are they? Well, as a druid, if it's a resto druid, you're probably looking for having Mark of the Wild and one hot rolling on you. If it's the resto shaman, you're looking for Earth Shields being placed on you. Things like that. If it's a holy paladin, you're looking for beacon, so on and so forth. Alright, guys? If it's a priest, you might have renew, you might have your blessing of fortitude, whatever it might be, just to show that that healer has activated something and is ready to go. Preferably look if your DPS is ready to go. So just those non-sequential situations have decided that you're now ready to pull. Alright, guys? So your healer's come forward, he started moving, you've got a buff from him, that means you're ready to go. So you weigh up your situation. What is the next philosophy of tanking? Well, you're going to assume that, one, your CC is probably not going to CC, which is rarer nowadays since CC is more important. You'll generally get a crowd control effect off someone if you ask for it. You're going to judge your gear. Is my gear really low? If it's really low, then maybe I'm going to ask for a CC. I'm not going to inspect anybody. I'm going to base it entirely off me, because remember, gear means nothing. So even though your healer might be geared to the teeth, he might not be a particularly great player. So from that, you're going to judge it on yourself. How much damage do I feel comfortable taking? And this is a bit of trial and error. So you might decide, I want to CC one mob, but go ahead and mark it. Maybe even say in party chat, can you CC that mob for me, please? And then from there on in, you're going to use the same raid mark all the time for your CC, and the other guy will naturally pick up on that. You're actually guiding the group. So you've CC'd a mob, go in and pull and start generating your threat. What is your next trick as a tank? Well, like I said, you as a tank, it's very, very important that you do not focus just on the mobs in front of you. That needs to be a very minor part of your play. You have two aims when you do a pull. Your pull is very important as a tank because you have some things to do very, very quickly. Firstly, you need to gather the mobs. You need to create a death ball. Okay, guys? Now, a death ball is something I demonstrated in my Prot Warrior video, in my Feral Druid. In every tank guide I've done, guys, I create a death ball extremely quickly. So we weigh up our mobs. We've got one caster, 3 melees. Okay, well, we know if we don't have a ranged interrupt, such as a Prot Paladin or a Prot Warrior, then the caster is not going to move when we do our pull. They're not going to come to us. So we go to the caster. Alright, guys, that's what we do. We go to the caster, either do a feral charge or a death knight, death and decay on top of the caster and move to that. Now, the melee mobs will then move to you. Ergo, you've created your death ball straight off the bat. Remember, if you can't do a ranged interrupt, then the caster is going to be your point of death ball. That's your death ball point. You want to create this death ball very quickly. So at the very point of the pull, we've gone onto the caster, or we've interrupted the caster, and we've gathered the mobs into a nice big death ball. From that point, you're just going to do your standard AoE. Why is that important? Well, one, we need to make sure that we're controlling the rest of the group. What's happening around us? This is where really good tanks start to shine, guys, is when things go wrong. So, we've got our death ball, we're doing our standard AoE rotation, we're just mashing our buttons away, and we're doing generally nice threat. What we have noticed is that player X, who's one of the DPSs, has moved to a rather ridiculous position near some next mobs. Now, because we can just smash away at our keys, we don't need to really look at them particularly a lot, and we've got a death ball, so everything is attacking us from the front, we're happy with that. We're able to just watch our party and what are they doing. So we've noticed that this player has gone stood in a rather stupid position. We also understand that this trash has various abilities, such as knockbacks, ranged DPS dots, things like this. And then we've noticed that the player's going to stand in a position where if he gets knocked back, he's going to start pulling mobs. We don't stop to start typing, guys. We continue doing what we're doing, and you're waiting for this to happen. The important thing about a tank is prediction. Predicting bad situations and how you're going to deal with them, because doing threat in an AoE situation is not difficult at all. So we're AoEing away, and we are prepared for player X to cause a chain pull of reactions. We're also looking at our cooldowns. Are we ready to cope with this? Let's suppose, in your head, run through this scenario in your brain before he pulls. If he pulls those, well, that pack he's about to ninja pull has got 3 melee mobs in it and 1 caster. So how am I going to deal with that? Various ways of doing it. So if this was to happen, player X pulled, first thing I would do is get to the next caster, because you've already got threat on the first caster if that is not dead yet. So what we want to do is we want to gain aggro on the melee mobs, either by doing a quick swipe, or a charged thunderclap, or a hammer of the righteous, anything like this, or drop a death and decay on them, and then we want to move to the caster again. Okay, now if the only real situation this is a problem for is feral druids who need to get over to the caster manually and run over, and then we can interrupt him and move him back to a safer position if necessary, because remember, all tanks can interrupt. But again, look for techniques such as death gripping the caster to the melee pack, or heroic throwing and silencing it, or throwing an Avenger's Shield over there, get it silenced and move it into a safer, better position. And then this comes to our next philosophy of tanking, which is positioning. So when you've got a bad heal, a bad DPS, and now you want to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. So what tricks do we know? We know for a start that all melee DPS need to attack from behind. And we are going to be the first person, in general, because we're always dictating the pace of the run, is that, well, considering I'm always at the mob first, I should prepare for the fact that my melee DPS need to attack from behind. Now, you might have a melee DPS who doesn't know he needs to attack from behind. But as a tank, we can make him do it without him knowing it. This is very important as a tank, is that you have the full-on ability to control the actions of others without them realising it. And it's a very powerful tool to use correctly. So every time, I want you to get into this habit of this, guys, is you go into a pack of mobs, or to a boss, you instantly turn it around. So the back of the mob is facing the rest of the party. Alright guys, there are very, very few situations where this is not necessary, such as the Trash and Tol Barad dungeon, which needs to cleave from the front and spread that damage out. But in nearly all situations, guys, your DPS needs to be attacking from behind. And you need to be making sure no mob is attacking you from behind because you have no avoidance from behind. So I want you to get into this habit, guys, of initiating a pull, either by moving to the caster or silence it and creating your death ball, and then turning that death ball around so everything is facing you and the back of all the mobs is facing the rest of the party. It creates a much better environment overall, and these little things are what makes the difference. If you have a group of mobs attacking from the front, it can be very awkward to actually see which mob is attacking other people if you've lost aggro. Melee DPS might start attacking from the front and then they're losing DPS because they're not really sure on that. But the pure fact is, if you get into this habit of charging into the mobs and then turning them immediately away from the rest of the party, your melee DPS is naturally going to run up and start attacking from behind. It's a natural occurrence. If you lose aggro, you'll actually notice the mob turns around and moves away from you. So then it's very easy to get aggro back from it. You can throw that snap taunt on because it's the only mob that's not facing you. These are very, very important things, guys. And these are very simple little tricks that you can use to make sure that your party goes smoothly as a tank. I then want you to move on from there, guys. And I'm not going to ramble on too much about advanced things to do. But I want to set yourself some challenges. And I'm going to see if I can get some feedback from you guys who are tanks. Just leave me a comment, etc. There's certain bosses where you can dictate this, and I'd like to hear that you've managed to do it. And there's some tricks to improve your play. Osrook in the Stonecore Heroic. I'd like you to go into the Stonecore Heroic, and I want you to be able to tank Osrook without him ever moving. Now this is a great technique to using various abilities, and it can be done on every single tank class, guys, because I've done it. You can tank Osrook. Where Osrook is stood in the Stone Core, there are 2 pillars either side. I want him to never move from those 2 pillars. I want him to remain perfectly still. Because there's a lot of trouble that comes from Osrook is people having to adjust position. There's a lot going on there for the rest of the party to deal with. I want you to negate that by the fact that you make Osrook look like a tank and spank fight. Although there's a lot to do for a tank on that fight. A lot of stuff and a lot of little tricks you can use to ensure that happens. Another one I want you to do is I want you to go into the Vortex Pinnacle and tank the Wind Boss, making sure that the DPS is always attacking with the buff and from behind. This means ensuring that you have the slow debuff on you all the time. And this makes the only person who should really need to move a lot is you. The rest of the DPS can simply adjust and attack from behind using the buff, and you'll notice the boss goes down a hell of a lot quicker. Now this makes more work for you, but as a tank, you should be prepared to put in that little bit of extra effort, and you really start to enjoy it a hell of a lot more, guys. That's the important part about being a tank, is if you do these little tips and tricks, you start to win. And the third thing I'd like you to do, and we'll talk about it when I get back from Florida, I'm hoping to see some comments on this, guys, is I want you to ensure that you have the more interrupts than any other member of your group in your 5-man heroics. I want you to at least have 4 or 5 times. It's not difficult to do at all, guys. You need to be the fastest interrupter in the West. I want you to be the Jim West of interrupts. Now get used to doing this, guys, and this will make you better on a hell of a lot more classes that you might decide to play. So I want you to ensure that next time you go into Heroic, you are the number 1 interrupter. I want you to forget about threat. Threat will come naturally, guys, and you'll get used to doing it without ever looking at your screen. I want you to get used to looking around you and ignoring the mobs in front of you once you've created a death ball besides just interrupting. Watching other players. I want you to very much get used to doing that. And I also want you to decide and get used to the idea of looking at your healer's mana and dictating to the rest of the group when your next pull should be. And is your healer ready? A lot of times healers don't realise they're ready because they think, oh, I'm on half mana, I won't be able to survive. You make the call, because if you pull, your healer will have to heal you. Alright, guys? So you don't make stupid calls. You don't say, well, you're on quarter mana, I'm going to charge in and pull this giant pack. This is where I want you to get used to how much damage you can take, and more importantly, how much you can mitigate by using cooldowns, interrupting, etc. Alright, guys? I want you to go ahead and use the philosophies I've talked about today, implement them into your own play, and give me some feedback, please, guys. Alright, guys? That's everything for today. Sorry it was a bit late. I've just been really busy, and we're looking forward to the Holy Paladin Guide tomorrow. Alright, guys? Goodbye.